Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing News.
Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Canelo Alvarez is not cherry-picking Billy Joe Saunders, and nor is he ducking Demetrius Andrade or Jermall Charlo. Let's just break it down with unbiased truth and facts. And the first thing we get into is, we've gotten thousands of comments from fanboys over the last week or so about ducking and Canelo Alvarez supposedly cherry-picking. So let's just expose these fanboys for what they are with absolute facts and truth. And we start with the GOAT, and he states Canelo fans don't want to admit he's a cherry-picking fraud. Guys wants absolutely nothing to do with Andrade, Charlo, Plant, Benavidez, Better Beef. He went for Billy Joe Saunders. Now, that's a very interesting statement. So let's just break it down. And we start with Billy Joe Saunders. And, guys are saying that this is a cherry pick because Billy Joe Saunders in his last fight against Marcelo Esteban, he looked vulnerable. He did not look like a top level, elite level fighter. And you know what? He did get the knockout. He did knock out Esteban. He got the victory. And there was no, disputing who won the fight because it was a clear-cut knockout. It was a clear-cut stoppage. Unfortunately, he did look, less than stellar in the performance. But, the funny thing about that is people are changing the narrative because he didn't have a top-level fight, because he didn't look spectacular in the win, that somehow this is a cherry pick, which makes zero sense. You have to understand, Billy Joe Saunders is an undefeated world champion at 168. How is it a cherry pick? Canelo Alvarez is still fighting at a weight class that's higher than what he usually fights at, which is 160. The fact that Canelo's moving from 175 down, why would you skip 168 when arguably that's his best weight? When arguably it makes sense that Canelo Alvarez should be fighting at 168 instead of 160, because you're moving down in weight slowly instead of dramatically. Instead of dropping a ton of weight, you're just dropping a little bit at a time to ease your transition. It makes perfect sense. But not only that, you look at other fighters like Demetrius Andrade. You see Demetrius Andrade had a terrible performance against Avanes Martirosyan where he was dropped and knocked down. His chin was exposed as vulnerable in that fight when he fought. But did that make him any less worthy of a great opposition or opponent to anybody he's faced? Absolutely not. Demetrius Andrade is a very good fighter. So you can't go with the narrative because he looked bad in a fight that, he's no longer a worthy opponent. And then you even see Demetrius Andrade look bad in the fight against Jack Colclay in Germany where he had a split decision victory. That was supposed to be an easy victory for Demetrius Andrade. This is a guy he already knew from the amateurs and that he beat. So this should be an easy victory. And yet again, Demetrius Andrade struggles again. But no one says that Demetrius Andrade doesn't deserve bigger and better fights because he struggled in certain performances, because we understand styles truly do make fights. And then you look at a guy like Jermall Charlo. Many people thought Matt Korobov was robbed in that fight, but yet Jermall Charlo got the nod. At the end of the day, we saw that Jermall Charlo struggled mightily with Matt Korobov and refused to rematch him to this point. And then you even see a guy like Brandon Adams moving up from 154 in what was an obvious showcase fight. A guy moving up in weight with no experience at 160 is supposed to be knocked out by a vicious puncher, which is the supposed Jermall Charlo, which is what he is, supposedly. And yet, with being showcased in his hometown on display, he gets, embarrassed by not being able to even stop a small guy moving up in weight. His power was exposed to a degree because at the end of the day, you're supposed to stop a little guy moving up. Let's be honest and unbiased. So he didn't look fantastic in either of those fights. But does that mean Jermall Charlo doesn't deserve a bigger or better fight? Does that mean that he's not worthy of a bigger or better fight? Not at all. And that's why he was still offered to fight with Demetrius Andrade. We have to be honest and unbiased. Just because you don't look stellar in one performance doesn't, exclude you from any bigger fights or make you any less worthy of them. And then, the second narrative that people are talking about is Canelo Alvarez doesn't want to face certain styles. He doesn't want to face a power puncher, someone that is as strong as Jermall Charlo that can knock you out. But what are we talking about? He fought Triple G twice. Win, lose, or draw, he fought him twice. So if he's scared of the style, why would he fight Triple G, who's a much harder puncher and at a proven and elite level than Jermall Charlo? They said he doesn't want to fight, Demetrius Andrade, who's a tricky, slick southpaw. And the funny thing about that is he's in negotiations with Billy Joe Saunders, who's a tricky, slick southpaw. People don't understand boxing. And then you also look at this. He beat a Danny Jacobs, who has a varying skill set and who has a better resume than both Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo. Let's be honest and unbiased. Canelo Alvarez fights, different and varying skill sets every single time out. And then, let's debunk the last narrative, and that is, if you call out Canelo Alvarez and he does not fight you, that means he's ducking, which makes zero sense to me, because let's look at it like this, just to name a few people that's been calling out Canelo. And most recently, Jamal Charlo's brother, called out Canelo Alvarez. Jorge Masvidal called out Canelo Alvarez. Tyron Woodley called out Canelo Alvarez. We've seen Danny Jacobs call him out. We've seen Billy Joe call him out. We've seen Julian J. Rock Williams call out Canelo. We've seen Triple G recently call out Canelo. We've seen Jaime Munguia call out Canelo. We've seen Dimitri Bivol call out Canelo. We see that he's the big money fight, and that's why everyone's calling him out. So to say that if Canelo picks one of these guys, he's ducking everybody else, no, because it's impossible to fight everybody at the same time. He's literally taking on champion after champion after champion. No other fighter is doing that. Jamal Charlo is not fighting champions. His most recent fight was with a guy coming off a loss. Andrade's most recent fight is going against a guy named Luke Keeler. Who? When he could end up fighting a guy like Sergey Deverenchenko or Danny Jacobs, but you're choosing to fight a guy like Luke Keeler instead of a guy like Danny Jacobs and proving your worth? See, this is what we're talking about. Canelo Alvarez is consistently fighting champions. You can't possibly duck everyone because you're fighting everyone. You're fighting the best of the best. You're fighting sitting world champions. It only pushes a false narrative against Canelo Alvarez about ducking, which is only a fanboy narrative. And then you even see, why Canelo Alvarez really wants to fight Billy Joe Saunders is because Billy Joe Saunders is an undefeated world champion at 168, and since he's moving down in weight, it only makes sense. You can't cherry pick an undefeated world champion who's in a desired weight class that you're moving to. At the end of the day, Billy Joe Saunders is not a weight class below Canelo, because Canelo Alvarez normally fights at 160, and he's coming down in weight to meet him at 168, which makes perfect sense. He's fighting an undefeated world champion. How can that be a cherry pick? Only a fanboy would say it. But once again, unbiased as always, just the IBFP.